I think we can all agree that the MCU is one of the most iconic movie franchises ever made. There are currently 37 films in the MCU and it has been around since 2008, which is basically 16 or 17 years. Some people may have not heard of the Monsterverse, but I can guarantee you that everyone has at least heard of Godzilla or King Kong at least once. Now let's get to the main question. Will the Monsterverse ever surpass or become the next MCU? Well, let me be honest and say that the chances of this happening are very slim. Why is that? Well, I can sum it down to two different reasons. The characters within each respective universe and the wait between each release. Let me briefly talk about the wait between each Monsterverse film. The first Godzilla was released in 2014. Kong Skull Island was released in 2017. King of the Monsters was released in 2019. Godzilla vs. Kong was released in 2021. And the latest edition, which is Godzilla X Kong, was released in 2024. And the future Godzilla X Kong Supernova is planned to release in 2027. If you look at all of these dates, then it's pretty easy to assume that each movie takes around 3 years to release, with the exception of the wait between Skull Island and King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. This would mean that there have been 5 movies released in the Monsterverse during the span of 11 years, which isn't that bad in general, but it is pretty bad when compared to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let me just quickly mention all of the MCU movies that were released from 2008 to 2019, which is also an 11-year span. Iron Man 1, The Incredible Hulk. Iron Man 2, Thor 1, Captain America the First Avenger. The Avengers, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy, Civil War, Guardians 2, Homecoming, Ragnarok, Black Panther, Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Endgame, Captain Marvel, and Far From Home. Iron Man 1 made $600 million. The Incredible Hulk made $250 million. Iron Man 2 made $620 million. Thor made $450 million. Captain America made $370 million. The Avengers made $1.5 billion. Iron Man 3 made $1.2 billion. Thor the Dark World made $644 million. And The Winter Soldier made $714 million. And I think you get the point. All of these movies made crazy amounts of money. Each movie also felt pretty different. From what I can see, that's 23 movies released in 11 years, which is roughly 2 movies each year. This isn't meant as hate towards the Monsterverse, because we all know that the CGI on these enormous monsters takes way more time than any other CGI from any other movie. You also have to take into account how there isn't just Godzilla and Kong in the Monsterverse. There's also the Mutos, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Tiamat, Mechagodzilla, Scar King, Shimo, the Skull Crawlers, Rodent, and many others who have barely gotten any screen time. As of June 2024, the Monsterverse has grossed over $2 billion, which is an amazing achievement. The MCU, on the other hand, has grossed over $31 billion, but you can't really compare it considering the staggering difference in films released. I do believe that Godzilla vs. Kong would have generated a lot more money if it wasn't released during the COVID era and on HBO Max. King of the Monsters did experience a pretty massive decline from the first Godzilla by making less than $100 million. The Monsterverse doesn't really have any amazing characters that are actually memorable, and this is kinda sad considering how much time is actually spent on production. The only 2 characters who are actually pretty good in my opinion are Dr. Serizawa and Gia, who was the girl who's been in the last 2 movies and is able to communicate with Kong. Dr. Serizawa was the character who set off the nuke and died by reviving Godzilla in 2019. I also need to mention the Skull Island cast because as a whole, that film easily had the best overall characters in the whole Monsterverse. I also wanted to mention Bryan Cranston's character, but he got killed off way too fast, which was one of the negatives I had about the film. Now, Millie Bobby Brown plays Eleven in Stranger Things, and she was also part of 2 movies, but her character didn't really provide much in Godzilla vs. Kong. But I will say that she was good in King of the Monsters. Now let's move on to the Marvel Cinematic Universe characters. Honestly, there's so many good characters, I will just list off some fan favorites. Thor, Loki, Spider-Man, Tony Stark, Captain America, Doctor Strange, Thanos, Black Widow, Nick Fury, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, the Hulk, Black Panther, the Guardians cast, Bucky, Ant-Man, the cast of Shang-Chi, and the street-level heroes such as the Punisher, Daredevil, and Moon Knight. Honestly, I could make a whole separate video for an hour just talking about each individual character in the MCU and what makes them special. But that's for another day. I feel like the Monsterverse has definitely surpassed its potential, but at the same time, there's so much more they could actually do. They could add some of the old kaiju such as Biollante, Hedorah, Gigan, Destoroyah, Anguirus, Space Godzilla, and so many more options. Anyone who has watched previous Godzilla films or even the current Monsterverse ones know that the Monsterverse could last forever because not only are new kaijus constantly being used, there's also hundreds of old ones that haven't been used yet. One thing I really like about the Monsterverse is how the brand new kaijus that they make aren't something we never expect in these types of movies. Kaiju such as the Mutos, Skullcrawlers, Shimo, and Scar King are all very well made and they fit right in. The overall designs of these new kaijus are excellent and the studio deserves a lot of praise. One thing that I've heard about was how the MCU was building up towards Thanos and the Monsterverse is just creating each movie with these kaijus and no end goal. I guess in a way you could say that Godzilla and Kong teaming up was definitely the Monsterverse version of Avengers Assemble. And I think that having Destoroyah be the final villain would be very good. It does seem like it's too early for the Monsterverse to actually make a film with Destoroyah being the main villain, because we still have so much more to explore with all of the new kaijus. The huge scale of production that we saw from the MCU is definitely a positive thing, but it had a sort of negative outcome in the future. All of these characters and storylines allowed for the MCU to become the most iconic movie franchise ever made. But it also allowed for people to experience MCU fatigue after Endgame. I would say that one thing the Monsterverse does better than the MCU is present stakes. Main characters really don't die in the MCU with some exceptions, but in the Monsterverse we've seen many of them die off. The most similar comparison I've seen is that Godzilla x Kong was equivalent to the Avengers, which I can see. The MCU constantly releasing new movies has meant that some of these specific films are not as well liked as the others. I'm mentioning movies such as Thor Love and Thunder, The Marvels, Thor The Dark World, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and a lot more. I do believe that no Monsterverse film that has released has been as bad as any of these, but it's just up to people's preferences and what they think. I'm gonna get off topic here and mention one film that was better than everything I've seen from either the Monsterverse or the MCU. The movie I'm talking about is Godzilla -1. Now, if you haven't yet watched this film, I would definitely recommend it because many people and websites said that this was the best movie of 2023. If you already saw it or don't care about spoilers and keep watching, the basic summary of Godzilla -1 is that Japan was barely recovering from World War II, and our main character named Koichi is a kamikaze pilot who is to stay at this military base. And while he's at this base, Godzilla shows up and kills everyone except for our main character and one other guy. Koichi has to live with severe guilt and also gets ridiculed by everyone else when he comes back. The reason why this is the best Godzilla movie ever made is because it's still an amazing film even without Godzilla in it. Godzilla is the main threat, but there's still so much drama and tragedy that happens. Not only is the movie very well paced, you also have characters who we actually care and can root for. This was just a beautiful movie that didn't have much of a budget, but it still allowed for so many emotions and amazing writing. I think if the Monsterverse actually took notes from this movie, then I think the popularity and success would increase by a lot. You already have Godzilla and King Kong who are already household names, so incorporating similar aspects to -1 would make the franchise a lot better in terms of writing. Up until recently, many people would watch every MCU film no matter how bad it was. This has definitely changed a lot when you realize that the last 3 MCU films, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, and Brave New World, can't even make over $600 million. Even the first Iron Man movie, which came out in 2008, made more than these movies. I would assume that a lot of people know about Marvel fatigue and have experienced it just because of how bad post-Endgame has been. The Marvels, Thor Love and Thunder, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and Eternals can be considered responsible for this. I didn't really want to put Eternals here since I actually liked it, but I know that a lot of people do hate it. The point is that so many people got tired of these mediocre films that once they started releasing good films, such as the last two, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, nobody actually wanted to go see it. I don't think it really matters that the last two movies or the last three have underperformed according to the normal MCU standards. We all know that Spider-Man Brand New Day, Avengers Doomsday, and Avengers Secret Wars are all gonna get a box office of 1 billion minimum, and maybe even 2 billion. This is one of the best things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's been built up so much that I don't think it'll ever actually truly die. Superheroes have always been one of the most popular and beloved things of all time. Let's say that Spider-Man Brand New Day is actually a good movie once it comes out. This would start the momentum all the way to the new Avenger movies, and everyone would once again become excited. That's enough talking about why the MCU is dominated and will continue to dominate in the future. Let's go back to the Monsterverse and talk about what it could potentially do to become even bigger worldwide. Focusing more on the other titans instead of just Godzilla and Kong, adding in likable characters that actually stay for a while, having better writing, and bringing in the other Toho kaijus are all ingredients for a recipe that can allow for the Monsterverse to keep on thriving. As a person who's watched every Monsterverse film more than once, I think that Skull Island and King of the Monsters were the two best in terms of the human cast of Skull Island and the kaiju aspect, which is from King of the Monsters. As I already mentioned before, in terms of the most balanced between a good human cast and kaijus, I would definitely say that Skull Island deserves to be called the best Monsterverse film. But the one I actually enjoyed the most was King of the Monsters, which is why it's my personal favorite. I've already mentioned everything I wanted to say, and anything past this will just be me repeating myself. So I think that's where I end this video. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe, and also share or check out my other videos if you want. Thank you.